Life is but a stage. I chose this title for probably obvious reasons, and I think that Shakespeare probably did too, because of the double entendre. Life is many stages, and life is its own stage where we play out many characters throughout our lives. I have often said over the last few years, and maybe some of you have felt this way too, that life should never be used in the singular for one person. We all live so many lives. Over the long arc of time, humanity has used the art of theater as a spiritual playground for self-expression and psychological exploration. From the depths of the Socratic cave long ago, which Plato used as an allegory for what we hide from ourselves as well. Sometimes our own lives can maybe hide from us because of the spectacle that they are, even when we feel the most authentic, the true depth of our own subconscious or unconscious, which Jung later came to call it. When we can emerge into the light of day and discover what reality truly is, when is that exactly? When is it that we are ever aware of what we are unaware? But theater can actually help us play with some of those things by pretending that they're not actually the case for us, that can allow us to express things that were previously hidden or that we felt ashamed or that would be inappropriate, that would not be okay to let out. Art can help us externalize and therefore come to know more of who we are, and theater can be used as a spiritual practice to explore these different aspects of ourselves that we may not feel comfortable with or feel permission to let out in our normal day-to-day lives. And this is most obvious when we have theatrical holidays like the holiday of Halloween, but it's also the case with protests like the No Kings rally yesterday, or how the people in Portland, Oregon, who have been wearing costumes as a satirical representation of the irony of the ICE officers to, I love Portland. It is like an episode of Portlandia out there come to life, but it's always been that way. If anyone's ever been there, they know that Portlandia is not really a farce. It's that way in Portland. And, but we should make no mistake, that is a very intentional act of theater. That's an extremely intentional act of theater. If you're watching closely what people are saying as they dress in these costumes or instruct others to do the same, they are saying, we are not harmful, we are not violent, we are going to wear the most benign things possible to display that to the public. Hello Kitty costumes, frogs, dinosaurs, unicorns. It's not just to be weird or quirky. It's a statement. Whether or not everyone in our nation or in the world understands that message, that's the root intention of this particular act of theater. I actually have had this particular subject on my mind for the past couple of months, and I don't know if those of you here are writers, if you've ever heard of, if you've ever read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, which is about writing and creativity, but I've had a really interesting experience over the past couple of months because I had the subject for this sermon and then the title for the sermon, and I knew, I said to a conversation to Gary in a conversation maybe a month or 6 weeks ago, this sermon wants me to write it, but I don't understand what it wants me to say. I know that it wants me to write it. And it's one of those experiences. I had this experience last year with the MLK sermon as well. I had the title and I had no idea what it was going to be about until I wrote it that morning, and I couldn't have. This sermon has been wanting me to write it since before people started dressing in those costumes in protest, since before Trump sent the ICE officers to Oregon. And I do believe that there is a spirit of consciousness that we can touch sometimes, that we can let flow through us. Sometimes Liz Gilbert writes about this in her book, Big Magic, that books and poetry are living and they want a vessel to be born through. So they will come through us if we're open. And if not, they'll go to someone else. And sometimes they go through many of us. So I, maybe it's a little woo-woo for you, but this is my truth, that I have been struggling with this. And it wasn't until this past week that I realized, oh my gosh, people are going to be dressing in costumes this Saturday at the No Kings event. And this was the weekend that we were supposed to be discussing the spiritual act of wearing costumes and theater and being a little Halloweenish. So I'd actually like to just share maybe one or two personal stories and then open it up for discussion, maybe do a little different than a full-length sermon, but have us explore this together and see what Spirit wants to say from each of us. I brought, this is not the White Witch of Narnia, but this is a little bit witchy. I have a story about dressing as the White Witch of Narnia. I got this at the Pride Festival recently. I got a couple of them actually. Yeah? You feel different. You look at me differently, right? What does wearing a little bit of something do? How does it allow us to be perceived differently or feel a little stronger or like more powerful, right? When we put some of things like this on stoles or the Side with Love t-shirts, they're powerful. When I take this off, it's different, right? It's really different. So I had a personal, I'm just gonna make you look at me wearing this for just a few minutes while I tell this story. So I had a personal kind of awakening to a facet of my own personality, which I'm sure has been there since childhood, especially I'm sure my little brother was aware of it since we were kids. While attending a Purim party over Zoom during the pandemic, we, if you're familiar with the Purim, the Jewish holiday of Purim, people dress up in costumes and you're meant to be topsy-turvy. You're meant to drink so much that you can't recognize your friend from your enemy. And you tell a story of this long ago oppression and you make noise with groggers whenever the oppressive king's name is said. And you relive the time when this oppressed people had success. You relive a time of victory, and it's a party. It's a festive party. So for this topsy-turvy holiday that celebrated the sweet joy of triumph over the oppressor, I dressed up as the White Witch from C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, just because we'd watched it recently at home. And if you've ever watched the BBC version or one of the newer versions of this movie, you'll know that the White Witch is just particularly savage in this very like cunning, cold, calculated way. She's so cold literally that she brings an eternal winter over the forest, and she is so good at it. She's so good at it that I cannot help but admire her. And taking on that character of the White Witch, it felt so incredibly cathartic. It felt so incredibly good to be that evil. It almost scared me a little bit and made me have a little bit of like a personal crisis in relationship to my self-identity. But probably, I'm just guessing here, I'm psychoanalyzing myself, probably it felt good to have permission to be bad. Because as an eldest daughter, as the older sister, as a white woman in the South, in the Southern Baptist yes ma'am, no ma'am culture, I was trained to be good. I was trained to be quiet. I was trained to follow the orders. I was trained to be of service. And in this role kind of extended into my life, taking on caretaking vocations, right, that I've pursued as an adult. And while being good and being noble suits me, it's also a burden if that's who we are all the time. That's not all of who we are. And it has even to the point where my given name, Lauren Alexis, Lauren, laurel crowned, and Alexis after Alexander the Great, this do-gooder, it literally means victory of the do-gooder. Like it felt like I couldn't get away. But we all have a little cunning inside of us, right? And it can feel good to lean into the permission to be fierce, or to be, maybe if we haven't been fierce all of our good all of our lives, it can feel good to lean into the permission to be soft or sensitive, right? Or to wear another side. It can feel good to let ourselves be playful and to explore other things, or to wear something that means something as a religious person or a person of faith in public, to show I'm strongly standing for something, like we do when we wear the yellow that says, I side with love. Some people say that this is one of the benefits of sports as well, to maybe let out a little, aggression or competitiveness. I know that some people say sports are just practicing for war, but others do say that this allows us to get that side of ourselves out in a healthy way, when we can express our inner competitor, or join in group mind and team playing. It's often accompanied by theatrics, maybe by mascots, kind of like the Portland Frog, right? And chants that we can sing together. Similarly, music fans know that at a concert, whether it's Taylor Swift's Eras Tour or the opera, something entirely different, that we can be transported when we lean into theatrics together as a community as well. Another very brief story that impacted my life, and this did turn me into a Swiftie, I was not expecting it, is that Haya and we were in Pittsburgh for the UU General Assembly, and I took her to the Children's Museum and out for a burger, and we never got our burger because we ended up going to the hamburger joint beside the Heinz Stadium where Taylor was performing in her Eras Tour. That night, there were people dripping from the walls. They were in costumes everywhere. And if you know about Pittsburgh, there's these 3 rivers, and so there's these bridges. So the bridges, the people, it was like the Tay-apocalypse, Noah's Ark. People were coming 2 by 2 for hours over this bridge. I mean, 10,000 people at every concert, right? It was for hours, dressed in costumes, glitters and sparkles and sequins, and I'm a Swiftie dad, and no one was plain. People were doing their TikTok videos and dancing for their phones. I mean, it was incredible. And this kind of thing is good for us. It helps us to express what's inside and have a transformative moment. This is like church. Religion is like this too, right? Hopefully, at some point in your life, you've experienced a moment of coming to a service that impacted you because we did something together. We thought about a facet of humanity in a particular way, and then maybe it changed us. Protests can do this too, as I said, concerts. And when we think about politics being like acting, like the political stage, I think one of the important things to remember is that that is what life is all the time. Yes, politics is like a political stage. It is theater. Yeah, maybe that does make it kind of bad. But it's not like that's not what we're doing all the time. When we go to school and our teachers act for us to help us learn, right? This is how we relate to one another as human beings. If you're at the dinner table and someone's telling a dad joke or a mom joke, to get a laugh, we are theatrical beings. And I think if we can lean into that, as we're already doing, then that can be transformative, leaning into it as a spiritual practice instead of judging that, politicians are different, right? The lawyer who tries to convince the judge and jury is different. No, this is just an aspect of our humanity. Gavin Newsom is a good example, or I should say the Latina woman who is leading the social media campaign and writing the messages for Facebook and Instagram for Gavin Newsom. I don't know if you've seen his posts, but they are incredibly dripping with satire. I don't have a quote here of them, mocking Trump in his voice. And yes, it's theater. Some have criticized it, but I personally have enjoyed it. I think it is important, though, for us to remember that sarcasm is not always digested by every viewer. So to remind ourselves when that's being used as a tactic, because it certainly is there. And I've already spoken about the Portland frogs and the other things that I began with, so I'll just lift them up again and just say, to end and bridge us into discussion, as Madeline read for us, and as Shakespeare said ages ago, all the world is a stage. And as we move from childhood to young adulthood to middle age to elderhood, if we're lucky, we live full lives and we have the opportunity to explore many different lives within each one life, or maybe even within each day. And so I'd like to ask us, what kind of theater do we want to create together? What kind of play do we want to put on the stage of life? Because we do have a choice. We have a choice. We have some choice each and every day.